Number 6, fear of rejection or criticism. Number 7, concerns about work-life balance, which is interesting. I have a story about that coming up. Number 8 is a lack of a support system. Not having peers, not having people around you that support you, encourage you to continue, encourage you to start your business. Hey everyone, welcome to the Business Growth Pod. I'm your host, Allan Draper. I'm excited that you are spending your very valuable time with me today. Today we were going to talk about the top 10 reasons that people say that they don't start a business for. So the top 10 things that get in an entrepreneur's way of starting a business. And then we're going to get into a little bit about what the true reason is that people don't actually pull the trigger. So we're actually live streaming this recording on LinkedIn. So we're going to see how that goes. And then we're going to release the actual podcast edited version in a week or two on YouTube and then all major audio platforms. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to cruise through the top 10 reasons that studies show that people don't, the reasons why they don't start their businesses. And then we're going to kind of talk about some ways to get around some of those things and some ways to make sure that we can kind of get to the next step with our businesses. So, number one reason why people don't start a business is fear of failure. And this is kind of the most prevalent reason that people are hesitant to start a business. And a lot of it just comes from uncertainty. We are unsure about what we don't know, and we are fearful of the things that we're unsure of. Number 2, financial concerns, right? There is a financial requirement to start a business, and while we're injecting money into a business, we also still have to live and we have financial obligations. Number 3 is a lack of security. So many people they prefer the stability of a job, which is an interesting thing. Recently, I had a buddy mention that he has been laid off twice in the last 7 months. I think that lack of security should be lack of perceived security. Number 4, fear of the unknown. We talked a little bit about that, but when you start a business, there's a lot that you don't know. Number 5, you have a limited experience or expertise. Number 6 is fear of rejection or criticism. And I think this deserves to be probably number 1 or 2. Number 6, fear of rejection or criticism. Number 7, concerns about work-life balance, which is interesting. I have a story about that coming up. Number 8 is a lack of a support system. Not having peers, not having people around you that support you, encourage you to continue, encourage you to start your business. Even though there are some unknowns, even though you're scared, even though you're worried about financial resources. And we can get into that a little bit and talk a little bit about some things you can do to get around that. Number 9 is fear of success, which is actually an interesting one because there's fear of failure on the front end and then kind of fear of success on the back end. I think this um, plays a little bit less of a role for us and more of a reason for others to stop us from starting a business. They are afraid of our success. Number 10, legal and regulatory concerns, which definitely come into play. People don't want to get sued. So let's talk a little bit about the fear of failure. What's interesting is that a lot of people are afraid that their business is just going to like fail, as in, they're just this monumental kind of catastrophic failure. And I used to think that about business. Like, hey, the only type of failure is I close my doors. If I have employees, they lose their jobs, I go back to my 9 to 5. The interesting part about failure, there's a couple of interesting things, but one of them is failure is not catastrophic in most cases. For sure, we all know companies that have failed to the point where they had to shut their doors. They had to close up shop. But in most cases, failure is I hired the wrong person. I overspent on marketing. I didn't clarify what my services were. I upset a customer. We made some mistakes, whatever. I think that's the more common type of failure. And that form of failure is actually helpful in that you're able to grow, you're able to develop your business, you're able to, in a lot of ways, failure leads us to success, because if we follow it, if we're able to get into an industry that is rife with failure, or there are certain pitfalls, and we're able to overcome those pitfalls, or we're able to provide a solution to those pitfalls, we have created our niche because we have this opportunity that other people haven't been able to figure out. Let's talk a little bit about financial concerns. This is certainly one that people need to be aware of. They need to be cognizant of. They need to make sure that they have their ducks in a row. But I think people take it too far. I think people worry too much about this, in that they think that they need more than they actually do. And I think that's what is stopping people. There are different levels of getting into business. There are some people that they will kind of create a side hustle, as it's called now, where they keep their main job, even a full-time job, and then they start with 5-10 hours a week until they can kind of get it up and rolling, kind of pull back on their 9 to 5 or whatever it is, and do it that way. I don't necessarily recommend this, but if you have family, you have large financial obligations, or your spouse is really risk adverse, this might be the way to go, where you can kind of just inch your way into your business and you kind of have a backup plan. I'm actually reading a book right now called Burn the Boats, which talks about this idea of, to be truly successful in life, you have to get to the point where you're taking risks without a safety net. But that is really going to come down to each specific case. So there are ways to kind of minimize the financial risk when you're starting a business. Number 3 I mentioned was lack of security, which is people like wanting to have stability. I've said this before and I stand by it. I think that the percentage of people that should start a business is a very minor percentage of the general population. Starting a business isn't for everybody. And if you're worried about security, and that's a significant concern, starting a business might not be for you, probably isn't for you. There are some items on this list that cut both ways. So there's a risk if you do it. If you do start a business, there's a risk if you don't. And the lack of security, it's going to be less secure in the short term for sure. In the first few months to a year, it's going to be less secure in that you're not going to have a steady paycheck. That being said, and I mentioned this earlier, I think banks, I think corporate America, I think even the government has kind of lulled us into this sense of security with 9-to-5 type jobs and getting a W-2. And if this is you, there's nothing wrong with that. What we're trying to do here is sort out the risks of starting a business and the things that are stopping you from starting a business. But if you're hey, I just like to go to work. I like to, at 5:00, I clock out. I don't think about my job. I get my paycheck. That's perfectly fine. That you shouldn't start a business. That being said, your job isn't as secure as you think. It's not. At any point you can get fired. Even if there's a contract involved, they could let you go, and there could be some recourse there, maybe some legal recourse. But at the end of the day, I always thought it was interesting when, I've been an entrepreneur kind of on my own for almost a decade now. And I think it's interesting that banks, when they look at an entrepreneur versus a employee, they think there's so much more risk with the entrepreneur. I've always thought that was interesting, that the people that work in my business or work for me, my employees, seem to have a more stable job than I do. That's just kind of an interesting connection there. Number 4, fear of the unknown. This is another one of those where, first of all of us fear the unknown. We really do. That, I think most fear is from not knowing what the outcome's going to be. This is true in relationships. This is true if you're going on a roller coaster. Because if you go on the same roller coaster that you just went on, you kind of know what it's going to be like, and the fear's not there. That's a lot of the excitement of the first time. But that is the case of everything. This one, unlike lack of security, I don't think this one should stop you from starting a business because it's so common. And there's ways to kind of hedge against this fear, and kind of just taking baby steps as you get started. Limited experience or expertise. I was getting a quote for insurance, business insurance, like general liability. And there was a question that was asked by the broker, and I said I didn't know. I didn't know the answer to the question. And the individual that was providing the quote said something about how I shouldn't have started a business until I had the answer to everything. And no offense to the employees of the world, but I could tell that she was an employee. Because if an individual waited until they had all the answers to every possible scenario, first of all, that's impossible. That's not an option to have the answer to everything. How many people knew about COVID, right? Nobody. So not only is it impossible, but if it were in this kind of hypothetical world possible, you would be waiting forever and you'd never actually start your business because you would be working toward this. And by the time, markets change, marketing forms change, people change, the labor market changed, all these things change. So by the time you've created a plan and you have most things answered, they're going to be different anyway. So limited experience or expertise. I honestly think there's so much that you can do and learn as you are already moving. I'm going to save number 6 for last, getting into the details of number 6. I'm going to do that last. That's fear of rejection or criticism. And I'm going to cruise through these other 4 real quick. Concerns about work-life balance. What's interesting is when I started my first business, I thought I was immediately going to have more time. I was practicing law. I quit my law job, and I quickly realized that I was wrong. I actually had less time. I had less availability in the short term, and that's the key. That's the key word, the short term, because when you get your business running where you can continue to replace yourself, that's where the flexibility comes from, both financially and in terms of time. So in the short term, concerns about a work-life balance, absolutely. And I think those conversations need to be had with your spouse, and you both need to go into this knowing, hey, the first year, 2 years, we're going to have to really be deliberate about family time, have certain, non-negotiables and work through that. Number 8 that I have on my list is a lack of a support system. And this one can be a really big one, especially if you don't have business partners. You do need a supportive spouse. I would not start a business if my spouse was saying, do not start a business, do not start a business, do not start a business. I wouldn't do it. I think with your spouse, you have to figure that out. You have to come to terms with them, because that relationship comes first. That being said, any type of formal support system, I think you can find in the world of networking. You can get online, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books, and use those resources to build your own network and make it so that it's like you're having a conversation with these individuals, these podcast hosts, these folks that are writing books and talking to you. And also you can get involved in local in-person networking events, and also online on social media and stuff. You can find groups where you can, especially niche specific, where you can join for example, there's a pest control group that I'm actively involved with where we lean on each other. So do that to find your support system. Number 9, fear of success. I don't think that this is a huge one. Where this one will come into play is kind of relating back to a support system. And that is, I think others will try to convince you not to start a business because they're worried about the success that you might have. They're worried that you might go on to financial prosperity, which you probably will. They're worried that you're going to have all these opportunities open to you that they're not going to have because they're not willing to take the risk and face these reasons, these hurdles for starting a business. So I think fear of success is actually, that will come more into play with those that are around you. And speaking about that, I have this rule of thumb where I will not take advice for somebody that I wouldn't trade places with regarding that specific subject matter. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't trade places with anybody. But it's just kind of the thought process. If I'm looking, if somebody's giving me advice about what to eat, what to do to get my body in physical shape, how to work out at the gym, and that person I wouldn't trade places physically with, right? Hypothetically, where it's like, hey, are they in better shape than me? Do they have their financial resources in place? Would I change places with them financially? And if the answer is no, then I am not going to listen to their financial advice. Why would I? Why would I listen to their advice if I'm in a better position, quote unquote, not necessarily to compare ourselves to others, not saying that we're better than them, but just in this one thing, like, hey, why would I listen to your advice? Like, what I've done has produced better results than what you've done. So worst case scenario, I just keep doing what I'm doing. And this is especially true of family members and friends, that we kind of pay heed more to their advice. But think about that. Don't do it if you wouldn't trade places with them regarding the advice that they're giving you. Number 10, legal and regulatory concerns. There are certainly some steps that you can take to feel better about this and to kind of get your mind right about it. Certainly surround yourself with professionals, especially regarding insurance and any type of liability. Make sure that you set up your company in a way, structured in a way where personal liability doesn't come into play. And there's certain things you can do. And I think this is a much smaller concern than number 6. And I said this before, but I think number 6 is either number 1 or 2. And I think it's kind of related. So number 6 is fear of rejection or criticism. And number 1 is fear of failure. So kind of going back to fear of rejection or criticism, it really has to do with our tribe mentality, where, the caveman DNA that we carry didn't want to be left behind by the tribe. And we're so worried about what others might have to say about us or what we think. If I could just give you 5 years of business experience, just put that in your brain, you would think that this element, this hurdle of starting your business is absolutely silly. I think a lot of it's because there's a couple of things. Number 1, we're so involved in our own lives that while we realize what's going on in the lives of those around us, we're focused on our own issues. For example, I'm really working on my golf game right now, and I am not a great golfer. I'm going to be, and I'm probably an average, maybe slightly above average golfer, just depending on who's I'm being compared to. But if I've noticed that when I look at golfers around me and I kind of get down on myself about my game, I notice, man, they kind of suck. Like they're not very good. And and this makes me feel better for one reason or another. And I think ultimately it's because golf is hard, business is hard, and we're so focused on our own achievements that we don't really see issues with those around us. And definitely it doesn't come into play as much as we think it does. As teenagers, people think that, teenagers think other people are always looking at them and talking about them. And they're so concerned with their own lives that it's just not happening. So ultimately, as we're wrapping up here, these are the 2 issues: the fear of failure and the fear of rejection or criticism from failure. And honestly, if you kind of fast forward your life, you're going to be, you're on your deathbed, you're going to be more concerned, and I think you're going to regret more of the things that you didn't do than the things that you did. And at the end of the day, you're taking a leap and doing something that puts you outside your comfort zone. If anything, it tells you what you're made of. It shows you what you're capable of, and will push you to the next level, regardless of what happens with your business. If you have questions, or if there's anything I can help you with to kind of get beyond some of these hurdles for starting your business, be sure to let me know, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Allan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.